Welcome to this. Excuse me. Welcome to the Daily Drum on WHUR 96.3 and 96.3 HD2 and Sirius XM Channel 141. I'm Bramante Bryant in for Harold Fisher. This is a special edition of the Insight segment. Well, as we enter 2025, a new year, a lot of folks are looking to make significant changes in their household. And that may mean reflecting and considering ending their marriage. January is known as divorce month, not officially, but a lot of divorces tend to take place at the start of the year. There's a high number of divorce cases then as you are looking to save your marriage. You've got some troubles, but you still want to hang on to that relationship. If that's the case, this conversation is for you. Joining us tonight as part of the conversation is Dr. Kia James. She's a licensed professional counselor. And Michelle Thomas. She is a divorce attorney and founder of MC Thomas and Associates. Kia and Michelle, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having us.
Michelle, I'm going to start with you. We're talking about trying to save marriages, and you are a divorce attorney. What's been your experience when couples come to you and they think they want a divorce, right? And they may be talking to you about a divorce, but are there ever cases where they say, we want to really save our marriage? And if you're put in that position as an attorney, how do you counsel them?
That's an excellent question. And I have to tell you that I believe that divorce should be your last resort. So in the rare occasion that someone comes to my office and says that they're not quite sure, or they want to try to, see if there's a last-ditch effort they can make, I encourage them to do so, to send them to people like Dr. Kia James, a marriage counselor who can perhaps help talk them through their problems. And if it doesn't work, once they've given it all that they can, then they can always give me a call back. But I do believe that, marriage, you should do everything you can to try to save it. But most of the time, I'll tell you, Bramante, that by the time people call me, they're usually at the end. They've usually made up their minds and they're ready to say, this is it. I can't do this anymore. Or they need a significant change in their lives.
Dr. Kia, Michelle says by the time they get to her, they've made up their mind. And so folks then come to you for counseling before they have to maybe get to Michelle. Talk to us about those couples who are looking to save their marriage, but they don't know how. How do you address them when they come to you in that state?
Well, many times the first thing that I'm going to bring up is, what are your hopes for coming? So that we can all be on the same page, because knowing that your partner is interested in making sure that, or making some changes so the relationship can work, is important, as well as you communicating that too. So once we're able to establish that we're both on the same page, it makes it a little bit easier to break the ice and begin to have many times conversations that people have avoided, people have kind of like tried to skate around or not have because it was uncomfortable. So many times we're kind of doing a deep dive back into the conversations and the things that happen that may have contributed to the interest in divorce.
And are there specific issues that you're asking clients who come to you to address? Do you deal with issues? Do you deal with goals? Do you deal with changes that you have to make? And is this sort of a long-term kind of conversation that you have to have? I would assume, just coming in and one quick conversation obviously is not going to do the trick.
Definitely not if you're already at the place where you're talking about the potential for divorce. So I would say all of the above. We're talking about issues. We're talking about, what the goals are. Being able to start where the goals are helps us to pivot back and talk about the issues in a more organized way. And as far as, I would say, the number one cause of divorce that I see as a therapist, once I dig deep, is disconnection, people that feel unheard, people that feel not valued, and all of those things dig into other issues like finances and that sort of thing. But I would say that disconnection is one of the leading causes of divorce.
Michelle, once they get to you, what's the biggest issue that you see when folks have decided they want a divorce, in terms of not being able to sort of manage it? Say, I know there's different types of divorces that you can file for, and we'll get into that. But is there one particular thing once they get to you where they find it difficult to sort of process a divorce in a sort of mutually agreeable way?
Yeah, well, I tell people all the time, the main thing that we help people with is their money and their children. So divorce lawyers, family lawyers, they deal with what matters most to people. Okay, so a lot of times when people are calling me, it's because they either have a dispute over the children, over time sharing arrangements. One parent or party may feel like they're more entitled or they're a better parent than the other one. Sometimes there's a third party involved, meaning, a mistress or, someone on the side, and they don't want the children exposed to this other third party. That makes it more complicated. What you have to remember is that the person is not necessarily leaving the children. They may be leaving you, but they still have a right to be in a child's life, and the children deserve to have their parents in their lives. So that is one of the big issues that we help families sort through and figure out what is best for the children, and certainly most favorable to my client as well. Then the other issue is the money. There's a lot of times there are economic imbalances, financial imbalances in marriages. Sometimes there's financial deceit. I often say where there's infidelity, you're going to also find financial deceit. And so figuring out how to sort through and navigate those issues, it's very common still that one parent or one party rather is unfamiliar, doesn't know anything about the finances. They may be trusted the other person for years and years, and then they find out that bills aren't being paid or money's disappearing. So those are all the complicated issues that you then turn to a lawyer to help you sort of sort through. But some of the issues that I think contribute to that is, as Dr. James was saying, there's disconnection, lack of communication, and certainly lack of appreciation. So if we're talking about sort of a typical couple trying their best to make it, it's the little things that erode the marriage along the way. The not saying thank you, the taking what someone does for you for granted, taking out the garbage, taking that for granted. So it's all those things over time that erode the relationship until one person turns off. Then a lot of times it's too late to turn them back on again.
And Michelle, I would think for you as a divorce attorney, maybe they get to you, right, as you said, and they're ready for divorce. But I would have to imagine that often you probably almost fall into the therapist role, because I would think they get to you and they bring up things that you have to then discuss beyond, like sort of the black and white. Here's the money. And it gets into, I'm just interested to know how you handle that. And is that true that sometimes it melds into you're in the therapist role and not just an attorney?
Almost no truer words have been said. I always tell people that being a divorce lawyer gives new meaning to the phrase attorney and counselor at law. So there is a lot of that counseling informal going on, a lot of that affirming people or, talking, discussing with them their self-worth. Maybe they deserve better than how they're being treated. So there's a lot of that goes on. But I'm also a firm believer that people navigating, going through the divorce process, they need to have that support system in place so that you're not paying me at my hourly rate to be your counselor, because that's not my primary goal. And so it's important to me that people have that support, like Dr. James, pastoral counselors, a few close family members. You don't need everybody in your business telling you what you need to be doing, but a couple of close friends or family members is really important, so that when you're focusing or working with your lawyer, you can stay focused on the legal issues and the strategy to help you achieve your goals.
Dr. Kia, you kind of hit some of these things in your initial comments, but is there how do you know when you need to seek counseling as a couple? Are there signs, very specific signs that in your experience you would say, okay, this is when you should try counseling. This is when you need couples counseling before you get to Michelle Thomas?
Right. We want her to have services, but we also don't want you to have to divorce, especially if you want your relationship, right? So that is a really good question. I would say, to be honest, we're all about being proactive, not reactive. And so we believe in making sure that you have a lot of stuff in place like going to retreats, like we have Black Marriage Week coming up. Go into retreats to help to preserve the relationship before you even get to the place of I'm having trouble. To be honest, the reason that we even came out, me and my business partner, Dr. Trotman, with the Relationship Boosters, came out of the office to do proactive activities, because we know that people wait an average of 6 to 7 years before coming to us as counselors to get help. And by the time some of us them come to us, like for instance, the man will think that everything is great, and then it's like, you're coming to me in an urgent panic. I need an appointment today. And most counselors don't do like it's not an emergency room, but that's how it ends up being, because things are neglected for so long. So it's really better to be proactive than, let me wait until I have a problem to address it. It's more like, let's work to preserve our friendship. Let's work to make sure that we're making sure we're on the same page with our partnership, that we both hear each other, that we're not feeling neglected and not saying anything. How can we date each other so we actually like each other and build that connection on the front end? And, so it's not really about waiting. Now, I would say that if you are sensing, like if you're sitting around and thinking like, I wish, like you're feeling lonely in your relationship, if you're saying, I wish we could be closer and we're not, or you find yourself saying things like, I don't feel like I should bring it up because it's going to be it's going to be unproductive. All of those are signs that the relationship is really in trouble. And that you should go and get more of like an individual counseling to help you to navigate some of these conversations. Yeah, and as far as like we refer people to divorce lawyers, like attorney Michelle Thomas. Like we do that because we feel like if you're at a place where you can't talk at all and you feel like this is not for you, then of course you do want to look into separation if that's what's necessary. But we also don't want to prematurely separate, because we also find like I have a lot of couples that are personal and people that I have worked with that have gotten divorced and then they want to get back together. And it's like, you had to get divorced to see that it wasn't all that you thought it was going to be, and now you're going to get back together. So my goal is like, let's do the work before it's more difficult to do the work, and then you just want to throw your hands up and be done with it because you can't talk anymore. You're just so frustrated. I'm a firm believer in thriving and enjoying life and not waiting until things like get so bad that you're stressed for years.
So do you often suggest separation, whether it's long-term, before you really go to the courthouse and file those papers? When you say some couples then decide, oh, I want to get back together. So what's your suggestion then? Do you suggest, if you feel like you can't be together anymore, to separate first, or do you not go there? Or should couples think about that before they start thinking divorce?
To be honest, many times I'm going to encourage you to work on your friendship and also to understand all of the options. So I would refer you to a divorce lawyer so they can help you to understand what it is that you're talking about doing. I think people should make informed decisions, not just reactive decisions just because I'm upset and it seems to be what my friends told me I should do. I'm not getting what I deserve. Like all of that is because I feel like people tell you what to do, and then as a therapist, I know that there's plenty of people who have told other people to get divorced or to do things that they're not willing to do themselves when they're in a similar situation. And I have heard that from many people. So I'm not about just telling you to do something like that. I want you to understand the decisions that you're making fully before you're going down an option like that.
Michelle, obviously we're sort of bookending this conversation. We've got a divorce attorney, and then we've got a sort of a marriage counselor who's trying to help save marriages. And then if the marriage can't be saved, then they see Michelle Thomas. And Michelle, you said earlier, one of the things that you said is big. Sometimes there's, and I don't know if you use this word, but I can't remember the exact word, but a financial imbalance sometimes can lead to divorce and lead to sort of dissension. What do you mean by that specifically when we're talking about in a relationship financial imbalance?
Yeah, what we're talking about are the power dynamics in a relationship. So a lot of times you may have one party who feels as though they're being controlled by the other party. So if the other party is the dominant breadwinner, like for example, and is the one, supporting the family, that person may feel as though their vote matters more because they're
Mm,
bringing in more money and they're devaluing the contributions that the other spouse is making to maintain the family, to plan activities, to rear the children, and so forth. And it doesn't have to be, a man being the breadwinner and a woman at home. I have many cases where it's the reverse dynamic, and
I was
so
going to ask you about that. Yes, sort of
yeah,
that
I
single
have
issue.
I have
Yeah.
a number of them where the women are the top breadwinners in the family, and so whenever there's that sort of economic imbalance in terms of financial contributions, sometimes that translates into control issues that parties have to navigate. It translates into one person feeling like they're not being heard, that their voice is being silenced. And then one party may sort of feel like they've been suffering in silence because they don't have a voice anymore in the matter because of the financial dynamic in the relationship. So you have to be careful whenever there is a decision where one person's a breadwinner, that the other person still feels valued and that there's some equality there in terms of how you're navigating in a partnership together and moving forward.
Dr. Kia, you said normally things are gone awry 6 to 7 years before couples really sort of sit into like, okay, either we need counseling or we need to, go to divorce court. Why that time frame? What happens in those 6 to 7 years? Why does it take that time frame before couples really decide we better address that we've got issues, and maybe subconsciously it, but you just don't step forward to come see you? Why does it take that amount of time, you believe?
Really, because people think that if they just stay quiet enough, things will get better. To be honest, I would say that is probably the most frequent thing, or you don't want to bring up something because you think bringing it up is going to make it worse, or you've been told that you're supposed to be humble and quiet. And so instead of bringing up issues, you kind of like just stack them inside. And then when you get frustrated, then it's like you're already on level 10. And the other person is blindsided because they thought that you were happy and things are good and it wasn't. So, I mean, there's definitely a number of scenarios where that comes up. And I don't know if you see that too in your office, like people start talking and it's almost like they have difficulty talking because they have not. It's like you're trying to now navigate some sort of like agreement and y'all haven't had a real conversation in a couple of years. So to me, people have a difficult time with that. And the longer, even like with anxiety in general, the longer you wait to do something, the more anxious you become. So then it's like you done already waited. Now you don't feel comfortable bringing anything up. It kind of just stacks and builds on itself and creates a life of its own.
Michelle, Dr. Kia sort of was posing a question to you in a way saying, do you see that? Do you see that in your office when you have couples or an individual come in? And that's the other part of my question. I would think it's rare where you see both come to see you, right? Isn't it just one or the other?
It is, but so to get to the point about someone sort of like losing themselves and having difficulty even articulating, I thought of an exact example, a case that I had not too long ago. And at the end of the case, it was a long, hard fought case that went to trial. And she sent me, thank you gifts and cards. And in the cards, what really stood out was she said, "Thank you for helping me find my voice." And when we started the case, she was a shell of herself, if you will. And by the end of the case, she was empowered to speak her truth and to stand up for things that were right and what was rightfully, and belonging to her. And so that was really one of the more gratifying moments. And so I see that where people come in and they are so beaten down by what they've experienced that it is hard for them to even conceptualize that they deserve better, that they matter, and so that's where that counselor comes in a little bit, where I'm telling them, no, you do matter, and what you want matters, and it's okay to ask for what you want. So I do see that, but yes, we only represent one side or the other because of what's called a conflict of interest. You can't represent both parties' interests at the same time in a divorce proceeding.
Do you ever have couples that come in to see you though, Michelle, and said, hey, we want a divorce and we want it to be amicable, so we're going to sit here together, and you have to say, I can't, legally, I can't do that, professionally, I can't think of the word, but professional etiquette, that you can't do that?
Sure. And there are times where both sides may call the office, both spouses may call separately, and it's like, well, no, whoever we spoke to first, then we can't communicate with the other side. And there are times when people call and say, oh, we just want a settlement agreement. And that is wonderful, because it is certainly better for people to take control over the outcome of their case by negotiating terms that favor, the parties in most instances, because going to trial is financially draining, emotionally draining. But ultimately, we would send one of the parties has to go find their own attorney or represent him or herself. So we can't represent both sides in the same transaction. But it is helpful when both parties have a mindset toward amicable resolution. That's helpful.
And we've got a couple of minutes before we go to break. I wanted to follow up with you, Michelle, also, when you were saying that you got this letter, right, and your client, and I think you said I said, thank you for helping me find my voice. Have you found that to be more gender specific, where women are feeling as if, they're not being as vocal about what they want and what they're demanding, or feel like they're in a weakened position by the time they come to you? Have you found that to be gender specific?
No, that's an interesting question. I'm always careful of sort of drawing lines along gender, because I've certainly been doing this long enough to have seen both sides affected by various issues. I would say, though, that more often than not, it is generally women who feel, beaten down by what they've experienced more often. I've seen men in that situation as well, but it is more often women who have lost themselves in the midst of trying to take care of everybody but themselves during the course of the marriage. And then if they're dealing with someone who may even have personality disorder or disorder traits, which Dr. James could speak to better than I, but narcissism comes up quite a bit in the context of divorce law, and, controlling behaviors, that makes it even more difficult.
All right, we're going to continue this conversation, but we're going to take a quick break. Before we do, Michelle Thomas, if folks want to get in touch with you or learn more about your services, how can they do so?
Sure. Find us online at www.thomaslawdc.com. That's thomaslawdc.com. We're also on social media, Instagram, Michelle C. Thomas, ESQ, at DC Divorce. You can find us everywhere online.
And Dr. Kia James, if folks want to get in touch with you and find out about the organization that you head and work with, how can they do so?
They can look us up on Instagram at relationship_boosters, and also our website at www.relationshipboosters.com, or check out our upcoming event, blackmarriageweek.com.
And we are going to talk more about that on the other side. But we're going to take a break, as I mentioned. Don't forget, you can hear every edition of the Daily Drum Insight segment via podcast on WHUR.com, or you can download the 96.3 HD2 app on your smartphone and hear the program live in its entirety. Again, this conversation continues online and on Sirius channel XM channel 141 and 96.3 HD2. The original Quiet Storm with Raheem Devon is next on 96.3 WHUR. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM channel 141 and 96.3 HD2. I'm Bermonte Bryant in for Harold Fisher. This is a special edition of the Insight segment. Tonight we're talking about marriages and divorce and how to save your marriage if you want to do that, and if your marriage can't be saved, the steps you may have to go through if there's a divorce, and what kind of help you can find if that's the next step you have to take. Our guest tonight is Dr. Kia James. She's a licensed professional counselor with Relationship Booster, and Michelle Thomas. She's a divorce attorney and founder of MC Thomas and Associates. Dr. James, I wanted to follow up where you left off when you were talking about this Black marriage kind of workshop that your organization is hosting. Talk a little bit about that, and specifically when you're talking about Black marriages, how are they different? If so?
Yes, I would say, thanks for asking that question. I think that a lot of times there's relationship advice that's given that's more general, and many times it can be helpful, but it doesn't account for the information the things that do happen in relationships where couples are Black. There's a lot of things that they experience that other ethnic groups do not experience. Some of the racial tensions, there's a lot of research that shows that your mental health and actual physical health can be improved if you and your partner have a good connection, if you're experiencing some level of trauma on the outside of your house, like if you're experiencing racial trauma or stress at work and all of those things. So there's definitely a lot when it comes to just specific Black relationships, and vulnerability comes in as a huge thing that many times people have difficulty with in the Black community specifically.
So what I'm hearing is oftentimes Black couples are carrying much more weight even within their relationship because of societal issues and cultural issues. Would that be correct?
Absolutely. The outside impacts the inside of the relationship. And indeed, if you have a strong connection, it's known as a protective factor that can ward off different ailments. So yes, we always talk about relationships and how to improve it and, how to strengthen it. But on the back end of that, we as counselors saw a lot of people coming in referred by their medical doctor because of stress on the outside. And we're thinking, like, what are the things, how can we empower the community to be more proactive in different ways in relationships? It's one of the things that are important to us. So we've been really focusing on that.
Michelle, we know, or I would think most people know, whether you're divorced or people who've been divorced, and a divorce can be contentious, a divorce can be amicable, but legally there are different types of filings for divorce, correct? Can you sort of share some of those with folks and the impact or what they mean depending on how you file and who files?
Sure. So the law has changed significantly in the recent years in DC and Maryland regarding the filings for divorce. So in Maryland, for example, I know you have listeners from all over the DMV, Maryland, DC, and Virginia. I do practice in all three jurisdictions. So I'll just speak to Maryland because that was the most drastic change in the past about year and a half. Mm-hmm. So there used to be fault-based grounds for divorce. You could file for a complaint for an absolute divorce or a limited divorce in Maryland. That has all changed. And so now there's just an absolute divorce that people can file for. And what's really happened, the most critical trend has been the elimination of this separation waiting period. Mm-hmm. So it used to be that couples had to be separated. In Maryland, I believe it started at 5 years, many years ago. Then it was a 2-year period, then 1 year period of separation, and now no period of separation. You don't have to be separated at all to just decide. You can decide today, I want to get divorced, and tomorrow possibly file. The grounds have changed. What used to be fault-based grounds are now considered irreconcilable differences. You can file on a statutory short period of separation, 6 months. I mean, it's changed so much. But I think the bigger issue regarding the culture is why has the trend been toward making it so much easier for couples to divorce now versus a few years ago, right. And like, has there been an erosion of the value of marriage in society? And that, I think, is the undercurrent in what we're seeing in the divorce and family law trends.
Wow, that's very interesting. So basically, the courts are reflecting sort of what's going on in society. Is that right, Michelle?
It would seem as though there's been an evolution of the laws that are essentially mimicking or mirroring the times. We've seen a change in values in the country, and as it relates to the family. And so I think the laws are trying to catch up to what society is saying that society may want. Whether that's good or bad is certainly subject to debate, but that's what's happening.
So no longer having to run down to Mexico for that, what you would see on these TV shows of the quickie divorce, right? And you have mutual consent, right? If two parties agree.
If there's everything's in writing, correct. If you already have a written agreement on all the legal issues arising from the marriage, custody, property, and so forth, then you can also just get divorced right away. There's no waiting period of separation anymore.
And another amazing thing now too is couples don't really even have to go into court, especially if there's a mutual consent. They do it like our conversation we're having beyond radio, but also online, that they do virtual hearings. Is that a good thing? Or is, again, that's just a reflection of the way society is moving?
It's a reflection of the times. I mean, the pandemic certainly changed the way we know life as we know it. And some courts have not gone back. And so there are certain counties in Maryland where you can, or DC, where you can get your final divorce virtually in about a 10-minute hearing on Zoom or, WebEx. So it's been expedited, the process. And, that's where we're at as a society.
Has that changed the people coming to you? Has that made them, do they present differently now than before?
I don't think so, because the underlying issues are still the same, right? Fighting over the children or parenting time is still an issue. Figuring out how to divide the money, how to pay support, what that should be. All of those underlying issues are still there. But if anything, it may have contributed to an increase or an uptick in filings, because there's no barrier. There's no barrier to entry, really. And it's unfortunate, because previously, let's say during a period of separation, maybe parties would have given it some more thought, or maybe said, let's take this time to go to counseling and see if there's any, anything else we can do. But now, if you have a really bad fight today, you can file tomorrow and move forward with an absolute divorce. And that some of the jurisdictions.
Yeah. And Michelle, that seems to me too, could really draw an even more elongated conversation, because, the courts may be reflecting society, as we say, but at the same time, as you just mentioned, if you have a longer sort of waiting period, that gives an opening, maybe, Dr. Kia, for things to work out. But I guess on the other side, if you're in a very sort of, if safety is an issue, right, or a lot of other more diabolical things happening in a relationship, maybe the courts are saying, hey, we don't want this person to have to wait to get out of this marriage. So I guess I could kind of see both sides of that. So Dr. Kia, I wanted to ask you about certain things in a marriage where there are struggles. The word criticism, what role does that play in a marriage, right? When you see a marriage that's having problems, where does criticism fall in there? And what kind of impact does that have in a marriage?
It has a major negative impact. It falls high on the list of things that are, say that you're going to be divorced in the next 5 years, especially if there's high levels of criticism, because what criticism does is it attacks your partner's character of who they are as a person and makes them a bad person, not necessarily attacking the issue or the problem, which then creates this whole conflict dynamic where you're kind of like going back and forth with criticism and defensiveness. And it doesn't really open the door to have like a real conversation that goes towards problem solving or resolution or compromise. So you kind of get into this bad dynamic that takes you down a long path towards, maybe now, since the laws have been adjusted, you can just get angry and be like, oh, I'm done with this. But again, like I said, maybe we'll also see an uptick of people getting divorced and then getting remarried. Maybe we'll see more of that too, since I do know people that get angry and they say that they want a divorce. And then when it comes to getting divorced, the person who said it is like, oh, well, wait a minute. That's not what I want. Now the other person is mad. They're like, I want a divorce. So there's a whole, there's a lot of back and forth things that happen that do start with small criticism. So let's be clear. Most things don't start with this huge event. There's things that just unfold over time. Little criticisms build up and create resentment and frustration. And then that causes people to have major conflict.
Are you seeing more of that where there's a divorce and then couples say remarrying or getting back together? Are you in your sort of just face-to-face interactions or experiences, not only just, reading or researching that, are you literally seeing that happening more and more often?
So I've been in this field for 20 years now. And to be honest, from when I first started to now, there's definitely an increase in what I have seen, not just seen on paper. Like I have seen people decide to go back and get remarried and then say, well, we don't want to make sure that we don't do what we did the last time. So it is a thing.
Michelle, we started off the conversation at the top where I said, offhandedly, January is seen as divorce month. And I guess that's partly because it's the start of the year. You make these New Year's resolutions. I want to move forward. I want to concentrate on me. Do you see that in the month of January, or is that just an old, tale that kind of just floats about out there? Or is there something real to that?
Oh, that's the absolute truth. I think any divorce lawyer who's been doing this for any amount of time will tell you that first week or two of January, the phone rings off the hook. I mean, we already have a waiting list of people, of potential clients for January. It is really something that people give a lot of thought to, particularly during the holidays. And as you know, it's, new year, new me. And the first thing on people's list is to drop some dead weight. And unfortunately, sometimes that looks like changing their home dynamic and their home circumstances. That's how they are sort of taking control of their lives in the new year. And so also, if there are children involved, people want to wait until after the holidays before they tell the kids. They don't want to disrupt that for that holiday experience for the children. And so when the new year hits, people are ready to start anew. They say, this is the one thing I'm changing in the new year, which is going to be, getting out of what they consider to be an unhealthy or possibly a toxic home environment.
Michelle, do you handle other legal cases beyond divorce?
We do divorce. We handle divorce and family law, which includes some child custody cases, but most of it arises from divorce.
And then I was going to ask Dr. Kia this, but I'll ask you first. When you're dealing then with children, especially children underage and sometimes overage if kids are in college, and you sort of have to deal with that, what is that like? And what should couples, in your experience, think about, especially when you're dealing with minor children and you're talking about custody and child support and maybe paying for college, or who's going to pick up, the payments from that nature? What should folks know, especially, when you're going to an attorney and you're dealing with kids in a divorce? That's for you, Michelle. I'm sorry.
Okay. So what people need to know is that you are modeling for your children relationship dynamics, how to resolve conflict resolution techniques. You are modeling for your children how to disagree while still treating the other person with respect or disrespect. And your children are watching you very closely, and they are also internalizing what it is that you are saying and doing. And so what you want to do is try to protect them and be the adult in this situation. And remember that the children did not ask to be in that situation. And also, if I could really impart one thing to your listeners, it's this: children love you both. They love both parents in the situation, and they try to please both, particularly young children. They try to please both. And so if they feel like they're getting all this angst from you toward the other side and vice versa, then they're going to try to take that on to try to please each parent. And it creates a stress for a child that they did not ask for and did not deserve. And so it's really important to be as mature about the situation as possible. Separate your issues. Whatever drove you to the divorce court is between the two of you as adults. And it's not about the children. And so both parents in general senses have something to offer the child. And what you don't want to do is use your children as pawns to take or seek revenge on the other parent, because that's really not right.
Kia, before these couples get to Michelle and they have children and their relationship problems, I take it most children, we may think they're not seeing, they're not feeling, they don't get a sense of what's going on in the household. Talk to us about, how children play a role when a couple is trying to save their marriage, but, they have children. And is it different depending on the age? Is it different with teenage children in the house versus younger children, and couples are trying to, figure out how do we save each other, but yet still have these children we have to deal with? Can you talk a little bit about that dynamic and what that is like as couples are struggling, but yet you still have family and young kids that you're trying to take care of?
Yeah, to be honest, Attorney Michelle Thomas took the words right out of my mouth. Like, it's the same regardless of the age. You really need to make sure that your communication, the way that you treat each other, like you're modeling good people skills, good relationship skills, um, because they're feeding off of you and your energy. So they're going to be more stressed if you're more stressed. There's a lot of research that shows that, children that are in the home with couples that are high conflict have problems with emotionally regulating, have problems in socializing, have problems academically. There's a lot that goes into that. And just because the children are adults doesn't mean that they're all fine now because they're out of the house. It still impacts them in a big way. And so for me, when I'm working with couples who have kids, it's important that they know. And sometimes I'm very direct, especially, and they're like, we want to stay together for the kids. And I'm like, I don't care about that right now. I want to know if y'all like each other. Do you want to work together with one another? Because at the end of the day, you staying together just for the kids is not beneficial for the kids, because they're now going to be in a place with high conflict and all of this stuff, because you're not really acknowledging that I'm going to work on our relationship so that we can be happy. And then we can teach our kids what it's like to be happy, what it looks like to have better relationship skills, what it looks like to be able to resolve conflict. So I think it's the same across the board. You just need to make sure that you guys are showing up as good humans who know how to treat someone else, because you're teaching your children how to engage in relationships, and not just a marriage. You're teaching them how to have friends and all of those other things. So you have to be mindful of that.
Michelle, when it comes to when a couple decides, okay, we want a divorce, or at least one person decides, I want out of this marriage, and that person comes to you and they're filing for divorce, does it make a difference in terms of the proceedings, in terms of the outcome, on who files? Like, if you file, does that have an impact on the divorce, that person who files, or does it not matter?
That's one of the more common questions that I get. And, just technically, whoever files first is going to be considered the plaintiff, which means that the plaintiff puts on his or her case first. That oftentimes means the defendant puts on his or her case second, and then the plaintiff may have a chance to put on what we call a rebuttal case, or rebut some of the evidence that was presented by the defendant if the case goes to trial. So that's just sort of some of the technical logistical differences. That being said, it's really a strategic decision and a personal decision. Some people don't want to be the plaintiff for religious reasons. They don't want to be the party who's perceived to have been seeking or filing for divorce if, let's say, they don't believe in divorce for religious, reasons. Strategically, it's something that each person needs to speak to an attorney about, and whether it makes sense for them to go on the offense essentially and file first or wait. There are many different reasons, or issues at play as to whether and when someone should take that step and file.
I'm going to go back again, just because I'm interested to know on the gender issue. Do you see it one way or the other in terms of filing? Does does a man tend to file more often, or does the wife tend to file more often?
I think statistics say that women file more often. And I think statistically they say because women generally take the initiative and do a lot of the work. That's statistics.
They are the
not
planners.
Me.
Yeah, I know. They're usually way ahead of the men. Yeah.
Yeah. But from a practical standpoint, I mean, I see both. I have male clients who file first, and women as well. So I don't know that there's a clear distinction in my practice, but statistics say I think women file more.
Yeah. Dr. Kia, what do you see in terms of when couples come to you, or when at least one of the persons in the marriage come to you? The sense is, I think generally that, women are usually ahead of the game of men. Whether it's a societal thing, they have to plan, they have to make sure, just the way society is set up, that they've got to sort of protect themselves to be able to, if they have to file for divorce, that they can take care of themselves. Do you see women being more proactive in terms of reaching out wanting counseling, for lack of a better term, having to drag the husband into counseling. I think men tend to be more insular and holding in, feelings and wanting to share. What do you see in that sense? Am I over generalizing that, or do you see that, or would you agree?
What I see is more frequently on the proactive side. I would say women are the ones who reach out more. Not that men don't reach out, because I do have a lot of men who reach out on their own, and their significant others are, they'll come, by themselves even before they bring their partner, because they feel like things need to be worked out. But more frequently, I would say women do reach out. That doesn't mean that men aren't doing anything, because I think that sometimes men may be talking to other men. They may be doing other things that are not specifically mental health related. There is a lot of stigma when it comes to mental health counseling. And on top of that, I've heard men say, I don't want to make this situation worse. And if talking about it is going to, they're concerned that talking about it is going to make it worse, then they're not necessarily going to come to the counselor as the first solution. So I wouldn't say that it's always women, but because men do different things that don't always register. And when I talk to men about it, many times they are saying, I don't want to make the situation worse, or let me try something else first. And even if a woman does come to me, it's not that the man doesn't recognize that something is going on. Many times they'll say, well, he said, he doesn't want to try counseling. He wants us to just do this first. He wants us to do that first. So there's a lot of other things that are coming up to kind of avoid counseling in the sake of not bringing up stuff that's going to make the situation worse, because they're into fixing, but that might not be the fixing route that they want to go.
Michelle, I'm interested in what you think about this question, and if you think this is out of your expertise, feel free to let me know. But I'm wondering what you think, how an individual, or individuals or couples can prepare emotionally and financially for a divorce. And is there such a thing? And Dr. Key, I think you could probably jump in on that as well. But I'll start with you, Michelle. In your experience, how do you think they can best do that?
Sure. So I'll take the financial piece, and Dr. James can take the emotional piece. So financially, it's most important to be informed. So you want to start compiling financial documentation. That includes bank statements and, the monthly household bills, mortgage statements, making sure that the mortgage is being paid on time, or the rent, or whatever the case may be. You want to, now we have to look into this sort of digital world. So all of the digital type accounts, the Venmos and Zells and Cash Apps and so forth. And we have to also now think about cryptocurrencies, and, it's vast. And, investment accounts, brokerage. It used to just be a checking, savings, and a, 401k. And now there's so much more to it. But the more information you can compile before you even meet with the attorney for a consultation, the more prepared you'll be, the more you'll be able to maximize on the meeting to develop a strategy to help you achieve those goals. Secondly, you want to be clear-minded about what those goals are. So, for example, if you want to keep the house, let's say, can you afford the house? Do you need to meet with a divorce mortgage financial specialist to help you work through numbers to figure out what you can afford, what you can't afford? How is it deeded? How is it titled? Is there debt? Another major debt piece that people need to get information about financially is tax debt. Sometimes people don't have access to the records anymore. If you need access, you can call the IRS and get what they call a tax transcript or something, but just get some information and data so that you are prepared to know what your options are, and your lawyer can help you sort through that, analyze it, and look for other components, which I won't go into more detail now about, but that's a helpful start, I think, to prepare.
And Kia, how I'll let you take the emotional part. If it now gets to the point where, okay, a divorce is inevitable, how do you prepare for that emotionally? Because I know there's just so many dynamics in terms of emotions, in terms of feeling a sense of failure, maybe depressed. There's just a whole category of things there. So is there any way, maybe that's the better question, to prepare emotionally for divorce?
I mean, it would be considered preparing the best way you can, as far as like working towards healing. And that contributes to you focusing on how can I make sure that I'm good as a person? And how can I make sure that I am also doing what I need to do for myself and still using my voice to do that in the best way possible? So it's healing and communication skills combined. And they're actually the same skills either way, because even in order for you to be a good partner, you still have to work on self-healing. You still have to work on communication. So it's, we talk about them kind of separately, but really it's the same. Because at the end of the day, in order to be for you to be the best partner possible, you need to make sure that you're good. For you to be the best parent possible, you need to make sure you're good. When you're good, your children can relax and be, feel like I don't have to worry about my mother or father. I don't have to babysit them today. They feel good. So everything is going to focus on that. And the communication skills are, not criticizing, not being not being so angry that you can't communicate. Across the board, you're just trying to make sure that you can relay a message. You can set things like plans so that you and your partner or your soon to be, because you might still have to work as a partner if you have kids together. So there's a lot of moving dynamics, and you still want to make sure that you are able to, if you are in Attorney Michelle Thomas's office, you want to make sure that y'all are good enough to negotiate and not have this huge standoff. So yeah, I mean, it's really working on you and healing.
In our last few minutes, Michelle, when does a person or a couple know that they need to see an attorney, that they need to go see Michelle Thomas? When do you know that?
A lot of times people have premonitions or suspicions that they try to ignore or suppress. So when you first start suspecting and feeling as though something's not right, or this person may be being unfaithful, or you notice money disappearing from an account, or money being diverted, what used to be, let's say, deposited into a joint checking account, now it's only a portion of that. And when you begin to notice changes and you begin to, have a sense that something's not right, listen to your instinct and do something about it. And I always say that it's really important to be proactive about protecting your future. And so there's nothing wrong with meeting with an attorney in advance before you even make the decision, let's say, that it's over, but to just figure out what your options are, what's the strategy behind it, what do you need to do, how do you need to position yourself today in order to put yourself in the best position down the road should you end up that way. So I say listen to the signs, read the signs, and be proactive.
And Kia, in our last minute, I guess on a hopeful note, we love what Michelle does, and she's obviously good at what she does. But when your couples come to see you, you're hoping that they don't go to see Michelle. And so on your last thought, if there are couples out there listening to this and they're thinking, okay, we've been married 20 years, we've been married 25 years, and we don't even talk to each other. We're roommates. We barely have any kind of relationship. Your advice to them would be what, whether it's married 3 years or 25 years?
If you're feeling disconnected, I would say an easy way to get started is start dating each other with the intention of having fun and enjoying one another's company. Get an opportunity to learn about one another. There's tons of cards out there that couples like to delve into to just get to know one another again. And of course, attending workshops like Black Marriage Week, where we walk you through skills and strategies to help you to communicate and build intimacy in your relationship. So do all the things that can help you to get back on track, because if you don't do anything, you might end up in a divorce because of not movement, right? Not because you don't like each other, not because you don't love each other, just because nobody did anything about the problems that were existing or the potential problems.
Kia, once again, before we leave out, I'm sure folks are probably going to want to follow you, find you, get your advice. How do they do so?
You can find me on Instagram at relationship_boosters, or go to the website at www.therelationshipboosters.com. And Black Marriage Week is at blackmarriageweek.com.
And again, Michelle, if folks would like your services or just to touch base with you, how could they do so?
Sure. Visit our website at www.thomaslawdc.com. That's thomaslawdc.com. Or find and follow me online, Instagram at Michelle C. Thomas ESQ, Twitter, Michelle C. Thomas, LinkedIn, Facebook, just we're everywhere. So just find us online.
She is Michelle C. Thomas, divorce attorney and founder of MC Thomas and Associates, and Dr. Kia James, a licensed professional counselor with Relationship Booster. Thank you both so much for this important conversation as we kick off 2025. Thank you all again for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
That's the Daily Drum for this Friday, January 3rd. I'm Bramante Bryant in for Harold Fisher. Have a great night.